China is going through many challenges internationally because the U.S. has suppressed and tried to contain and has really waged war upon China, has really tried to contain China. And so, China is very aware of this, and it's facing headwinds, etc. That really scared. And then Chen Gang also said the United States, if it they're proliferating conflict, well, if that's how it's going to be, it's not acceptable for us not to respond. And all across the media, it was, well, China wants a conflict with the United States. I want your reaction on this because the two sessions was ignored mainly or dismissed in the Western mainstream media, the collective West media. But at the same time that this was happening, there's another development. Today, we've heard New York Times report that U.S. intelligence says that a Ukrainian group, a pro-Ukraine group, blew up Nord Stream. This is just after Olaf Scholz walked out of D.C. with his tail between his legs. So I just want your reactions on these events because I feel like they're very related and they really speak to this level of desperation that you two were talking about earlier. Carl, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, this right now, like Garland said, this I think it's the media environment is a reflection of copium plus deflection, right? The copium is like we're doing fine when the house is burning down, we're doing fine, and the deflection is deflecting from the real failures of the U.S. policy and what U.S. is doing to provoke Russia and then to provoke China and then to shift the blame on the others, right? So what Xi Jinping said was actually common sense. That's for everyone can see. U.S. is trying to put together a containment strategy on China. This is not just what people observe. This is what U.S. officials are publicly saying. We are now trying to contain China, right? And so there's nothing wrong with this. Factually, it's correct. Now, it's pretty unprecedented in one way, is because Chinese leader before never really communicated to the Chinese people in such stark terms. Unlike our media, who has been preparing U.S. population for war for a while now, Chinese leaders haven't been telling the Chinese people, it's like, okay, the relationship have been going pretty bad, and then we need to prepare for war. Like that. They have not done that. So this is pretty unprecedented when Xi Jinping is directly speaking to the Chinese people, telling them that now the collective West, headed by U.S., is trying to contain China. So we probably should prepare for hard time ahead. And factually, what he said was correct. And the fact that again, it's part of the deflection that U.S. media is focusing on what he's saying rather than what prompted him to say it. And then this is it's like for the U.S. politicians and the pundits, it's all a game for them. They appear tough on China, tough on Russia, right? And they know the end result is they're going to get more fat kickback from their buddies in Boeing, in Lockheed Martin, in Raytheon, who is going to get increasing orders. It's all a very corrupt, very corrupt game for them. But Chinese leaders, they listen and they watch, right? Confucius says, you listen to one's words, but watch one's action. They can see that U.S. have been escalating, is climbing a ladder of escalation in terms of provocations. They take it seriously. I mean, maybe for the pundits, it's a very corrupt game to make more money for themselves. But the Chinese leader takes these threats uttered by U.S. public figures, including U.S. officials, U.S. congressmen. Chinese leader takes that seriously. That's why they're taking action. That's why they're increasing their defense budget to 7.7%. There's a 7% increase in the China, and even with a 7% increase in the Chinese defense budget, it's still far below per percentage of GDP, what U.S. spends on its defense.
Right. It's
It's
about
not even
half of
close.
what the U.S. It's about half of
Yeah.
what I think China spends 1.7% of its GDP on the military, and the United States somewhere between 3 to 3.5%. So nearly double.
U.S. spends more on military than China, Russia combined. And this is it's crazy. And when I say spending on military, maybe I should qualify. They're not spending money on like veterans welfare, right? They're not spending money on that. They're spending money on very expensive weapon system that doesn't even work, like F-35. The F-35 is not supposed to work. It's just supposed to suck money out of the taxpayers and transfer into the pockets of the weapon manufacturers. It's a very crooked game. But again, like I said, for U.S. pundits, U.S. politicians, it's all a game for them. But when the Chinese leaders hear the threat from supposedly U.S. leaders or U.S. thought leaders, they take it seriously. I mean, who can blame them? Given the amount of the provocation that U.S. have been carrying out against China, why wouldn't they be prepared?
And before I get to you, Garland, I just want to read this quote. Arnaud Bertrand said that he quoted from the Wall Street Journal. This was what Xi Jinping had to say. Western countries led by the U.S. have implemented all-around containment, encirclement, and suppression against us, bringing unprecedentedly severe challenges to our country's development. Anyway, Garland, just want to kick it back to you.
And I would argue that's a fairly practical statement. It's a fairly muted statement. It doesn't say we got to bomb them or attack them. It just says, hey, we got some challenges ahead and we have to prepare for challenges. A couple of things I'll throw out. Number one, one could argue that China is spending more on defense than us because what they're spending is on defense. Think about this. We got 850 bases, that $850 million, right? We got all of these bases in the Middle East, in the bases, AFRICOM, bases all over South America. If you start off by just taking the amount of money off the top that it takes to maintain the bases that we have all over the world, I bet you got over 50% of the budget there. Then 12, 14 aircraft carrier groups, right? If you look at the money it takes to maintain this imperial power projection thing that we have, by the time you get to the actual dollars and cents that we would have to fight a war, also keeping in mind what Carl is saying, and that is that when Raytheon makes a missile, they don't make a missile as a strike weapon. They make a missile as a product to get as much money as they can. We've even seen in Ukraine a number of the things that haven't worked as well as they thought they would because they weren't made to be weapons. They were made to create to create a profit. So when China makes a tank, they make a tank. The government owns it. There's no profit. There's no games played. There's a tank. I was watching, looking at some numbers. I forgot words, but I was looking at some numbers where, like these ships that we were making, that Russia could make 3.5 to 4 for every one that we made, because the government basically built its own ships and we built these ships with these incredible amounts of, ours was 70% profit. So from the perspective of finances, I didn't see it. You guys look out for it. I was told by a very reliable person today that there was an article in the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the hard version, not online, that said the U.S. is in no way prepared for war with China, which is true. If you look at these like CSIS war games, they're like, yes, in the first week, this would happen. And you're like, okay, well, that ain't, right. Well, what happened in the second week? Huh? The second week? There's a second, because that's what happened in Ukraine. We're going to do this. All right. Russia's been in wars for a long, long time. They've been in, they've spent many, many years in Syria. They ain't going nowhere. So now 6-8 months down the line, what's happening in Ukraine? Oh, crap, we're running out of stuff. We didn't think about it lasting that long. The U.S. is not prepared. And as I was saying earlier, and I've said this, if you said to me, Garland, you got to fight this guy right here by next Thursday, right? This guy's, if you wait till after Thursday, if you fight him anytime after Thursday, you'll probably win. Up to Thursday, it's a draw. I'm going to wait till after Thursday to fight him. I ain't fighting him because I know if I wait till after Thursday, I'm probably going to win. In fact, I'm going to wait 10 Thursdays where I know I can win. So if the concept is we've got to fight China now, because if we wait till later, we'll beat them, China's going to be like, duh, okay, we'll fight you in 15 years. And then we won't have to fight you. It only makes common sense. So China knows, and I've been saying this all along, China knows that time is on their side. They know that all they got to do is drag this thing out. I think also, I mean, I'm opposed to war. I don't like war anywhere, right? But it is what it is. This Ukraine conflict is going in. The U.S., they got 1 foot in the tar pit. Let me tell you, when you get 1 foot in the tar pit, you might as well have all your feet in the tar pit. You're going down in the tar sooner or later. So they've got 1 foot in the Ukraine tar pit. All China has to do is stand over there and watch them. Because the more they struggle, the deeper they go down in the tar pit. When you look at their so-called allies, their vassals in Europe, what's going on? People are in the streets. People are getting angrier. People are getting upset. They're starting to say, wait a minute, this doesn't work for me. The U.S. isn't on our side. What's going on here? I would bet you, Olaf Scholz, I don't think much of him, but I would bet that there are some rumblings from European leaders saying, I don't know how much longer we can hold on, because the guillotines are being sharpened in the streets. And these people are not going to put up with this much longer. So Russia, all they have to do is all China and Russia have to do is just keep doing what they're doing, slow and easy. Time is on their side. The U.S. is in a rush. The U.S. is in desperation. 2024 is coming. So Biden's going to get freaked out by that pretty soon. And the parties are going to be trying to deal with that. Here we've got Lindsey Graham literally saying now we should attack Mexico. Have you seen that? Look it up. Lindsey Graham is saying, yes, some Americans were killed in Mexico. We might have to use military force in Mexico. And I'm thinking, well, then I guess the Russians will start sending tanks to Mexico, because if it's okay, well, good for the goose, good for the gander.
I wanted to just, before we move on, you mentioned this article, Garland. I found it. And this is what it's titled: "The U.S. is not ready for the era of great power conflict. Since 2018, the military has shifted to focus on China and Russia after decades of fighting insurgencies, but it still faces challenges to produce weapons and come up with new ways of waging war." But the interesting thing for me is the author of this article, Michael Gordon, who, with Judith Miller during the pre-Iraq invasion, was the reporter that supposedly broke the weapons of mass destruction story, ended up being falsified intelligence, i.e. lies. And so this is Michael Gordon. This is that guy talking about this. This is how, as you talk about Garland, this is how the neocons are. They're all in a big club and they're all saying the same things, and they're keeping their ear to the ground on these issues. But anyway, I'll stop there and pass it on back to Carl.
I was going to point out the same thing. The same Michael R. Gordon also wrote the Wall Street Journal exclusive on the so-called lab leak theory. Who recent Department of Energy report, low confidence report. I just, what the hell is low confidence report anyway? I mean, they had pretty high confidence when they said Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, right? And it was also Department of Energy, let's not forget, that put out that report that Saddam was trying to purchase uranium cake from Niger. And it was also reported by Michael R. Gordon. It's the same tool for the empire. And even that article that when he says U.S. is not ready for a great power conflict, he's advocating basically increased defense spending in U.S. to purchase more weapon platforms. But on that note, I agree. I agree with what Garland said. I actually agree U.S. is not ready, because especially from listening to that talk on U.S.-China war, oh my God, people are so ignorant, and people still act like if China is going to have a war with cross the Taiwan Strait, all U.S. have to do is send its carrier groups and park it inside the Taiwan Strait. That would be suicidal. I mean, even U.S. military knew that. This is not 1950 anymore. In the 1950, Truman authorized U.S. 7th Fleet to send its aircraft carrier fleet groups into the Taiwan Strait to prevent Mao's People's Liberation Army from cross to to defeat Chiang Kai-shek on Taiwan. That happened because China in PRC in 1950 did not have a navy. They didn't have an air force. Today, they have missiles on mainland that cover the entire range of the Taiwan Strait. Any U.S. ship sailing in time of war, there will be sitting target. Taiwan Strait will be a kill zone. The U.S. military actually knew this. If you notice, right now, the U.S. sometimes will send one lone ship to do like a freedom of navigation through Taiwan Strait, but the carrier group largely stay away from the Taiwan Strait because they know it will be dangerous. You know, like that's will be literally kills. I mean, I don't want a war. You know, I definitely do not want a war. Break out over Taiwan. But the way that people were talking about it was so stupid that I have to point out, like people are saying, "Oh, but you don't know how mountainous Taiwan is. You know, perfect place for guerrilla warfare." Look. Yes, you can look at a map and say Taiwan is very mountainous. That's why majority of Taiwan population is crammed into this coastal plain facing mainland China. You know, the moment that you have to go into the mountains, that means it's lost. Everything is lost. You know, and guess who live in the mountains? Indigenous Taiwanese tribes. You know, who are not necessarily a fan of the current Taiwan government. Now, I would bet my top dollars if the Taiwan government official flee into the mountains, the indigenous people would just turn them over to the PLA. And like that's most likely what would happen. And so people will keep still making the assumption that, okay, China is going to fire the first shot. U.S. is going to come in as the white knight, like come to rescue. But if a war breaks out, I'm not saying it is, and I do not advocate war. But most likely scenario is China will put a naval blockade around Taiwan because Taiwan is an island, right? And once you have a naval blockade, it's no longer a situation like Ukraine where you can have a proxy warfare and fight Russians to the last Ukrainians, because Taiwan is an island. If it's a naval blockade, it's over. And then what would U.S. do? Sending the Seventh Fleet? If you send Seventh Fleet in to break the naval blockade, then it's war. Then it's a direct war between two nuclear powers, between China and U.S. All that ensues. Like what happens when China sinks a U.S. aircraft carrier? Like the U.S. Pentagon or generals have said, if that happens, it will use nuclear weapon. Well, guess what? Once you go nuclear, you're not coming back. There's no coming back from nuclear weapons. There's no de-escalation ladder for a nuclear exchange. You only go from tactical nuclear weapon to strategic nuclear weapons. That's the only way it's going to go, and everything is going to be over in half hour. I was playing Fallout 2, Fallout 3, the game. By then, we'll all be live action role playing as a post-nuclear apocalyptic world. I mean, this is very serious, but people are still talking about it very nonchalantly, right? In the U.S. media, they still think this is some kind of imperial game they can play. This is life and death, man. This is very real. And but the sad thing is, it's these mouthpieces for Pentagon, for Raytheon, for Boeing, they have so dominated our airwaves, our media platform. We're not even giving the U.S. public a chance to discuss, why is it necessary for us to have a confrontational relationship with China? Why can't we just trade? It's a very simple question. Nobody's asking that because, like Garland said, that the U.S. lead is in panic mode right now. I like the analogy that you made, Garland, about they think everything is a feudal hierarchy. But I like to point it out. Not only they treat everyone outside U.S. as peasant, they obviously don't treat the U.S. working people as part of the nobility. We are all peasants to them.
No, they're the labor aristocracy, long gone if it really ever existed.
They treat us as peasants too. Like all three of us, we all pay taxes to the United States government, but we have no say in the freaking very important decision whether this country is going to commit itself to a nuclear exchange with a nuclear power. This is crazy, man. Something is wrong with this picture.